welcome to episode 1 of Shoot the Shit, the podcast where I interview men because I want men to talk. Today, I'm joined by a good friend, Matthew King, and we're just going to have a chat and talk about all things life, vision, and chuck in a little bit of mental health. Matthew King, thank you for joining me.
Pleasure. Thank you for having me.
No worries. I think, obviously, first things first. Who is Matt King? What's he about? What's his journey? What makes Matt King a man? I guess.
Oh, that's a very good question, Lewis. That's a big one to throw at me straight away. Well, I think a big definition of me is sport. I've been very sporty most of my life. I base most of my things around sport, whether it's my lifestyle, it's my ambitions, whether that's what I've done in the past, whether it's playing, reading, learning and researching about it. I'd say it's quite a pivotal thing for me. It's my strongest interest. What else makes me a man? I don't know. All sorts of things, really. I am very musically driven as well. Not that I play that much, but if it comes to knowledge, certain bands and listening and finding new music, I pride myself in taking time to do that. I'm a dab hand in the kitchen. I think, in my eyes, a good man can cook well, so I like to pride myself on that. Just continually developing, Lewis. I'm a partial way through my life. I've got this far, and I'm willing to keep learning and keep developing as best I can.
Amazing. So I think we met at uni, which is quite a big step for a lot of people in their life. You mentioned sport. You were actually my coach originally. And
I was, yeah.
In the wonderful sport of rowing, and then we became friends from that, which was that for me was probably a big. That's sort of like where we were quite a tight knit group of men. It wasn't really like a conversation of like talking about feelings, but it felt like a camaraderie. I guess you've mentioned sport already. I think one of the things that I really want to get out of this is talking's great and sort of understanding like your feelings and where you're feeling bad and like sort of addressing that thing. But not one thing that I've sort of noticed with conversations that I've had with people is everyone's different and everyone sort of gets out of ruts or gets themselves into ruts for different reasons. And I imagine that element of sport and that sort of being able to be part of a team, whether you're having a conversation with that person genuinely about your feelings or whether you are just playing that sport together, that in itself is a way of stepping out of a negative sort of mindset. Is that something that you'd agree with? What's your sort of viewpoints on team sport, individual sport? Like, how do you see sport helping in that sense?
I think it certainly can, and it depends on the group of people that you're playing with. Like I said, sport's a really important thing to me. I started playing cricket actually when I was younger. I used to love playing cricket. My dad was a huge influence on my sporting career. He was a very good sportsman when he was sort of my age now and a bit younger. And he was a big rugby man, and he wanted his boys to play rugby. But lo and behold, actually, at the beginning, I didn't really want to play rugby. I'd played it a couple of times. It wasn't something I was really driven towards. It was actually something I grew myself into a bit more. I had a bit of a natural talent for it. I was quite good at it. I think my dad was proud of it, which was a strong point. But during my earlier stages of sport, I suppose I wasn't like super keen. Like I was in a team where I was a bit like, I don't know, I never had close connections with like my team members, but I worked my way up. I was captain of the team for a long time, up until sort of mid-teens. But there were certainly times when I dreaded going. I was quite a shy, sort of introverted person when I was a lot younger. So sport was a good thing to force me out of my comfort zone, that's for sure. But it wasn't all like sort of plain sailing and I can't wait to go and train and play a game. But as I got older and sort of, I suppose, not accepted. understood like the ins and outs of sport and actually the real benefits of it. And I think as I started getting to my later teens, I kind of went from my boyhood club to a much higher level playing club, because it was like I was recognised as a good player, and that was quite a nice confidence boost. And I could see myself, sort of my commitment, my as I was captain and stuff, like my drive from my first team, I was kind of pushing away and wanting more. Which, I mean, I'm not the most ambitious person, but when it comes like that, and when you are sort of putting your body out there every week and you're getting beaten up and you haven't got people around you supporting you, it kind of it dampens the experience. So moving up to this better team was really good. But I think the main drive came from actually when I started at college. I'd come with not a reputation, but people had heard that I was coming up to college and I would have been a decent addition to the team. I got into the first team in my first year, which is at college level not necessarily heard of too much. And we were very lucky to have actually a very strong year. And in our second year, I was named captain again, nice sort of confidence boost. I think those 2 years were the best, most enjoyable time of rugby and sport I played. Because I was given that responsibility, and like I liked the idea of sort of looking after a team, but I think more so the team actually wanting to play well and wanting to play with me and for me. So I found that like a really proud moment. And actually, the group of lads I played with, like I'm really close friends with a few of them still. We were a good bunch, and like you say, that camaraderie we had at uni, I kind of had that in that rugby team, and it's a special thing. Like when you're with people where you can tell them if they're fucking around, stop doing that. But at the same time, you go for pints afterwards, and you have a really good sort of outer team and social life as well. I think that's what really sort of drove my sort of, I reckon, from 16 to 19, 20, those 3-4 years of rugby were the highlight of my rugby career, at least. And then I think, but unfortunately through that whole time, injuries were quite rife for me. I've always been a bit of an injury basket, and by the time I'd hit my early 20s, I'd sort of had enough, and that's when I found the sport of rowing and thought it would be a relatively good substitute. But I mean, it never quite hit the itch, but it was a new challenge and something different for me to get my teeth sunk into. And actually, it's moulded a huge amount of my sort of 20s, I suppose, because then after uni and going through it, it really drove where I thought my career and what I wanted to do in that direction. But not so much now.
Not so much now.
Not so much.
But yeah,
now.
it's interesting. It's interesting that you say that it's that because for me, like, and like to sort of link it back, it's like a lot of people say one of the key things is exercise and getting out there and sort of trying to find an outlet, but it's really important that outlet is the right outlet. Like it's all right. Like I see a lot of these charities, like not to say that they're not doing good work, but it's like come and play football with us. But like you might have played football as a kid, but you might not enjoy playing football to a certain level, or there might be someone there that's trying to drive the level up, and that in itself is naturally going to make it slightly worse. It's like your outlet becomes less enjoyable, which then adds pressure and sort of creates that sort of cycle. So I think it is really important to make sure that it's something that is the right level or the right sort of team or right activity. I think you said it yourself there. You tried something else, and that's not. You could have gone and sat in the fourths or as an injured rugby player and sort of not done sport and ended up in that and sort of lent more on the social side of it. Whereas I think it is important to have a fitness element to it, to have that social side of it, and that could have potentially been, you might have seen them playing rugby and that might have driven you into a bit of a spiral of like, I really want to play, and potentially injure yourself further, and who knows what that could have led to from a mental health point of view, like what that could have done. So it's,
I think my final sort of injury and surgery, that was probably one of the lowest points, I think, where I'd been like, I don't want to play sport anymore. Like I've had enough. I don't like this. I'm just sick of being in and out of hospital, recovering. You play for a handful of matches a season. I don't think I ever played a whole season. And yeah, I think at a younger age you can kind of brush it off. You heal a bit quicker, and it's a bit easier. And I think maybe something like I mentioned, like my first team, I was even as a I started playing when I was 9. I left them when I was 15, 16, I think. And I was the one consistently turning up to training, but I was the one also consistently getting injured because I didn't have a supportive team around me to actually help me in situations. Like I got carted off in an ambulance near every other weekend. I almost had my own parking spot at the hospital. I knew all the St John's ambulance. Like it was to that level, and it like I said, at that age you bounce back a bit quicker. You go back, you're a bit more like, oh, it's okay. But actually, as I got older, you get a bit more fed up with it, and that other than other lower points I've had for a sporting blip, that sort of in between of my knees buckling at the age of like 19, 20, and then coming to university, I think a couple of years later. So I didn't really play any sport. Did a bit of gymming and stuff in between, which I mean I still do now, but it's not quite the same. But yeah, that's certainly injury's a big one. Injuries is a really big one for a lot of people, and I don't know if I had much of an outlet, or I think I spoke to my dad about it a bit. But again, going through your late teens, I don't know if, I mean, back then you wouldn't have thought there's much support. Like you can speak to your dad so much, and none of my actual mates, because none of my mates at college by then had sort of moved on to university and stuff, so I didn't see them as much. And none of my mates from home play sport. A couple of them play a bit of football, but other than that, no one's really been a full-on sport player at that age. So it's not like I can fall back onto my really close friends from home. So yeah, it was quite a tough one. And then I think, yeah, so I found rowing, and more injuries reoccurred. And then again, I think I had to stop to my knees, and that's hence why I moved into coaching. That's what a lot of people do, don't they? Can't play anymore, so they start coaching. And I'd never coached before, and that again, it's sort of pushing myself out of my comfort zone, which I do. I think what you were saying earlier about sort of finding that right sport and making sure it is right for your mental health. I think that is a massive thing, but at the same time, sometimes you do need to push yourself out of that comfort zone and challenge yourself, and not and give it a bit of a go at least, not like sort of go, oh, I don't know, and then try and have a bit of a kick about. Like I think a bit of resilience, especially when it comes to mental health, is really key. Like it's great being aware and understanding and getting help. At the same time, I think you can do some of that yourself and learn to be resilient towards things and think, right, well, I do feel a bit shit, or this is out of my comfort zone, or I'm not sure, I'm a bit anxious about this, but actually I know I'm a bit stronger than that, and let's just give it a go. I've always had the sort of mindset. I find I struggle when people go, I don't like that. They're like, well, have you tried it? No, I don't like it. Can't do that.
Yeah.
And I'm a bit like, come on, you can at least give something a crack and give it a decent go before you really write it off, and if it really makes you feel uncomfortable. So yeah, like it's an interesting one, but I definitely agree. You do want to find the right thing, but there's got to be a little bit of resilience and effort put towards it, I think, than writing things off.
Yeah, definitely. I think for me recently, I've sort of the reason that I sort of started this podcast was mental health started to become a little bit more of a prevalent thing within my life, whether I'd seen it from friends, or whether it just started to become a little bit more of a forefront of news, and it sort of and obviously there's always going to be a personal element to mental health, and I sort of took stock, and I sort of said, right, where am I at as me, as sort of like in my current state. And it's exactly what you said there. Like you have to be ready to make a change. It's very easy, and I think this is sort of where you have dependency on sort of support and sort of a lot of listening and a lot of talking. But at the end of the day, I think that final stage, and that where I'm going to make a difference, is I have to make a commitment to this. I'm going to start a new sport, start a new hobby, speak to more people, go to more parties, whatever it might be, or whatever you see as your growth or your movement out of the rut, I guess. Essentially, it has to be a commitment. You're 100% correct on that. You can't go into it half-assed, because you're more likely to fall back and potentially make it worse, because you're like, oh, I tried that didn't work.
Yeah, no, exactly. I think I kind of categorize that as sort of like self-development, and like you exactly said, like you can get so much help, you can talk so much, you can express your feelings, which is great, and it's that first step of like identifying it. And this is something I've been working on quite recently, sort of the last 5 years, of various reasons. And yeah, like it's good. It's really good, that first analysis and understanding and thinking, right, well, I do need to speak to someone, or get some help and things. And then it's then what you do with that information and how it actually benefits you. Like I've seen a counsellor for a long time. I'm not currently seeing one at the moment, but I would wholly recommend it to anyone, whether you're feeling a bit down, whether you're in a shit situation, whether you just need someone neutral. It's amazing what you can say to someone you don't know. It actually makes it a lot harder, easier. Sorry. And but then again, it's like, right, well, I've done this. We've identified a few things, but you can't take it. You've got to take everything with a slight pinch of salt. Like it's not necessarily that. Like it's so complex. Like you've got to take a few things that resonate to you, and then you've got to run with it. You've got to say, right, well, if this is happening, right, that's the problem. What's the solution? You can't just keep sitting on the problem like, oh, I've got a problem. Well, guys, I've got a problem. Okay, it's not that. It's like, right, okay, here's the problem. What can I do about it? Do I need to do some different therapy? Do I need to change these things? What is it about me that I can change personally that I can improve on that? Otherwise, you're just never going to get any better. It's a bit like when you're grieving and stuff, you go through 7 stages of grieving. It's like there's 7 stages of like recovery and changing. Like you've got to identify, you've got to make a move, and you've got to stay consistent. And like you say, you've got to commit to it. You can't just do it a little bit. But like anything, it's not an overnight process. It's not something that you're going to go, right, okay, I'm going to change that, and then I'm going to be the best version of me. It's like it comes in swings and roundabouts. You do it, you identify it in some areas stronger than others, and then you just got to keep working. But like it makes life a lot easier when you do that, and sort of like I say, it's that resilience of actually wanting to make that change and personally developing on things. And I wouldn't say try and do everything at once, but if you've identified a few things that you know, and you've got to accept that that is something that you do work on, then you can then go about actually learning how to work on that. Like reading, I've done loads of reading on various things I know I've wanted to work on. Like my communication styles, how I communicate, how I get my feelings across. And it doesn't work 100% of the time, but as long as I know I'm working on it and I try my very best, and sometimes it makes me feel really fucking uncomfortable, but once I've done it, it's like, oh, okay, that was way easier than like if it's bottling something up for however long, or if it's not expressing away your feeling. Like I think it's just really important to then be aware of yourself and actually be happy with yourself as well for making those changes and sort of working on those developments. Like we're all works in progress. It takes a long time. Like I'm 32 in a couple of months, and it's taken me this long the last sort of 5 years to really understand that. But from where I was when I was 27, 28 to now, like I feel so much stronger, and then it has a huge impact on everything else in around life, like the relationships you're in, towards your family, towards the things you do. It definitely makes life better if you want to keep developing and not sort of stay on that one block, I think.
Yeah, most definitely. I think it's quite funny that you say it's easier to talk to someone you don't know. I was actually rather nervous about starting this because I thought I'm going to talk. The easiest people to talk to will be my friends, and then I was like, actually, this is going to be like just about to. It was like 10:29. I was like, oh, he's going to be here in a minute.
Is he early?
Yeah. But yeah, we obviously we see each other not as regularly as we did at uni, but we still try and keep in touch. And obviously, it's not nervous when we see each other then, but we've chosen to actually have a serious conversation for a change. I imagine that like there's always a little bit of banter and a little bit of ribbing, which is like we're we sort of, yeah, it's just men, I think, in general,
Mm.
like no matter where you come from. But I think you touched on some really good points there, which for me is it's never going to be perfect. It's never going to be a full solution, and it's always about giving something 100% and also testing and trying different things. I'm one of the reasons that I want to do this, and one of the reasons that I want to talk to lots of people is you said they're reading, you said that you've had counselling. Counselling isn't going to work for everyone. Reading isn't going to work for
No,
everyone, but it might
no.
work for someone else who's not tried that. And I think for me, I didn't go down a counselling route. I just looked myself in a mirror and just wrote everything down and
Mm.
went, right, that's the shittest thing on my list right now. That needs to be sorted. Otherwise, all of this is going to get dragged down with it. And like you said, that might lead into relationships. That might lead into things with family. That might lead into business and career. Whatever that might be. So it's just good to hear what other people are doing. And I think some people might just want to listen to this conversation and never. That's their action. Is like,
Yeah,
okay, so these guys are talking about it. I'm now going to go and assess what's wrong with me. They may never go and speak to someone, which is also fine. But you have to be at that point where it's like, I'm ready to make a change and I'm ready to sort of assess this. As with anything, I guess, like if it was um, rehabilitation from an injury, whether it was drug or alcohol, like whatever your condition might be, if you're not going back into that 100% and committed to moving away from that, you're more likely to either cause yourself more damage or revert back to where you were originally. Um, you've obviously touched on your age. You're an old man, wide shoulders on a young body.
I
Is
try and stay young. I try and stay young.
You try and stay young now. What do you think has been some, I guess, societal pressures? So like I've just turned 30. Well, I say just January, so coming up to 31
Yeah,
now.
almost 31, mate.
Yeah, the societal pressures of like sort of where we need to be, where we need to be at. Like you went to uni a lot later than me. I went to uni a year later than is the norm.
Mm.
What do you think has been some societal pressures that you sort of faced, and how have
Um,
you, if you have, overcome them?
I've been pretty lucky, to be honest. Like, societal pressures are one thing I try not to let get to me. Like, I want to live my life. I don't want my life to be driven by others' perceptions of what my life should be. Like, it's something that's probably actually come a bit more relevant now, more in the sense that in the relationship I'm in at the moment, like my girlfriend is a bit older than me, and we want to continue our life together, sort of thing. And she has like her idea of like having kids and a house and thing are a bit stronger than mine. Like I've never completely written it off, but it's something that we've had to address, and it's probably one of the more recent things I've had to sort of really, bit like you did. You said you sit in the mirror, like you kind of sit down, you have a real think of like, right, well, having a free flowing live for the moment life is great, but when you've got someone really special in your life that has to have a bit more responsibility about things like having children, because she like that window doesn't stay open forever, um, and the sort of the ideas of settling down, yeah, it's more in the last sort of year that's become a reality for me, I suppose. And I've had to actually sit and think about it, and not so much society, it's more the situation, the person you're with. I think like all my friends at the moment are getting married, having kids, and I'm a good, and I mean, some of them are a bit younger than me, some of them the same age as me. I'm a good sort of year off that, but it has made me think. I'm like, I mean, at the moment, I'm unemployed. I'm living back at my parents slash around the world, which is amazing. Like, I'm doing what I love, and thankfully, I've got like an amazing partner that also loves that, which definitely makes it easier. I mean, I had to sort of apply a little bit of pressure to get her to come away, but I think it was a really good move for both of us at the same time, and it's something we fell in love about. So I'm like, it's super important and like really really special for me that she wanted to do that and we could do it this year. Um, but yeah, like I've just spent 7 weeks in the Namibian desert, just the two of us. You get to know someone pretty well when it's just the two of you, when the next town isn't for another 2 hours away. So it's, yeah, this sort of topic of kids and houses and settling down, and when all your friends and people around you are doing so, a pressure I've never experienced before. Like, it made me question myself, because I'm like, am I just pissing my life away? What am I doing with myself? And I've never had that before. Like, I've always been really headstrong in terms of like, I don't I don't want to be living a life that's judged by what other people are doing. I mean, that's a big reason why I don't use social media, and like I don't want that influence, because it's just, I find it negative. I find it really constricting. Like, who are you to say that I should be doing this, this, and this? Basically, just because everyone else is doing it. Why is society like that? But I mean, that's probably another topic for another podcast. Yeah, last 6 to 12 months it's become a bit more of a realization, but I wouldn't say it's more society. I'd say, like, if you've got a partner that you love dearly, you've got to make compromise. Like, you've got to listen to them, and I think that's another big thing. Like, in terms of mental health and being in situations, is having the ability to compromise and um, actually discuss things, and it makes you realize what is important to you, and like, having a strong partner certainly is important to me, just as much as going around the world doing all sorts of things. So we're both sort of now working out how we incorporate a life together, because we're both in the similar sort of thing. We don't like society driven life. Like, we don't want to just buy a house, have kids, and then that's it. Like, we're fucking 32, 33. There's so much life to go, really. And we're both adventurous, so it's how we then incorporate that more adventurous life into, um, like, say, having that next stage of life together. Um, but other than that, like, society wise, I like to be different to society. I like to do things out of the norm. Like I say, I've spent a lot of my time traveling. I don't. I'm not career driven. Like, I wouldn't say my career is the definition of me. Not that I say people should be a definition of them, but I'm not like, my next stage of career, my next paycheck, and all this and that. Like, it's I get that it's necessity, but it's not what I want to be dictating and, like, ruling my life. Basically, I've always I've always worked. Like, don't get me wrong, I'm not a freeloader. Like, I work hard, but I'm not going to have it as, like, turning in and out of an office 9 to 5 or whatever it is. Like, I'm always willing to try and find new things and do what's right for me. But then at the same time, having my sort of lack of ambition can sometimes be a detriment to me, which has caused me issues, because I'm like, well, if I did have a bit more ambition towards things, it would be easy to find a job when I get back. And then that whole, like, pressure of, I say pressure, but the responsibility of then wanting to buy a house or having children, like, you've got to support it. Again, I'm a realist as well. I'm not thinking everything's made out of rainbows and butterflies and it all just work out. Like, you have got to have a bit of a straightforward head on you. So it does then start sort of playing on it. And I think more recently, that's again something I've been working on myself, is working on how to think forwards a bit better and be a bit more of a forward planner, because it's something I've really struggled with, and not just the sense of, like, see, having children is a big step, but anything I find really hard to really plan forwards for, and that's something I know is something I now need to work on. So it's what I've been reading into, and I've found a couple of things that, again, like I said earlier, you've got to take these things with a pinch of salt. It might not be necessarily the right thing or the exact thing that is causing these issues I'm having at the moment, but it's something I can read into and relate to. So then, if that's the case, I can start working on things from that. And if it works, great. If it doesn't, you go back to the drawing board. You start sort of working around things and seeing what you can do. And I mean, if it got to the case where I was really struggling, I had no bloody idea, and I was in a bit of a pit, then I would consider going back to getting some professional help. I'm already considering doing that in terms of my career, because, like, I know I enjoy sport, I know working outside, but then things just don't come up that regularly. So it's then like, well, maybe I just need a bit of help and guidance to push me in the right direction, give me some ideas of what I could do, and then run with it. Um, so yeah, I think in terms of society, those are the main things at the moment. But otherwise, I don't try and let it get to me too much.
Yeah, I mean, well, it's a great mindset to have. I think for me, it's a similar sort of scenario. I've got friends getting married, having kids. I'm the godfather to one of my friends' children. Like, they've bought houses, they're getting married, they're living life. But
Mm.
yeah, for me, it's just not on my radar at the moment, and I've just accepted that. And I think for me, and I think you've sort of touched on it as well there with the bringing someone else into the equation. I think you have to have that right
Yeah.
sort of like grounding that yourself before you sort of move forward with a relationship and start to tackle those tough questions. And I
Yeah, I
think
think that's a really good word actually.
once you
Grounding yourself is, I think that's what I've been doing recently. Is you've got to you've got to be pretty willing with yourself and understanding before you can then really uh, incorporate that into your relationship, and then it, like I say, it makes you realize what's important to you. And like, if my relationship was important to me, then I wouldn't want to proceed with like building a life around it. Like, it's
yeah
like that's just a recipe for disaster. So you've got to be really honest with yourself and really honest with your partner in terms of what you want and how it's working. But then I suppose, again, speaking on the mental health side of things, like having a really supportive partner has been key. Um, like, it was my last relationship which unfortunately drove me to a pretty low point in terms of my mental health and confidence and everything. And then actually finding my current partner, who she really brings the best out of me, and I feel like I can talk to her about anything. And it's a huge contrast when you have that support. Um, and I think there are certain things I'd probably rather talk to my mates about than a partner. But I know I've got a strong network of friends as well. But I think having that strength in partner and relationship is pretty key as well.
yeah I think so too. I think the whole premise of this podcast is getting men to talk. I think it's okay to lean on your partner, not in a sense of like that step like your bottom and like put a lot of extra pressure on them, but
Yeah,
it's life and they're big decisions. Like a child is an 18-year commitment. It's not
yeah,
a sort of a fumble in the sheets decision. It needs a lot of thought. There's a lot of other things to it, and there'll be a lot of things as you um, sort of bring that child into the world. There'll be other decisions like how do you educate that? What's the living situation? Are we going to travel? Are we going to try and get the child to enjoy the world as much as we do? As one of the sort of side things on that. But yeah, you have to talk to them. You can't. It's not. I mean, there's a lot of sort of jokes and sort of like um, parents like or potentially a little bit older generations where it was the man went out and worked, the wife looked after the kids. Like we're sort of well past that stage. We've got
oh yeah,
two careers, two sets of opinions, two viewpoints on how to raise a child, and do they all marry up? And is, as you say, is that an important part of what you want? Is that what
mm,
you want for that relationship? And I think it's important to address those things early because you don't want to create resentment or you don't want to put you don't want to stop your partner doing that with someone that might have those goals themselves, and
no,
that's sort.
exactly. And these are very real conversations I've been having recently, and it's fucking hard. Um, and like I say, it really makes you do that sort of look in the mirror and make you sort of realise what's important to you. You've got to address things, and yeah, like you say, you sometimes you have a bit of a joke, have a bit of a play, but then when it kind of gets to crunch time, um, the real conversations are pretty hard. And I think, like I say, recently I've been in the arse end of nowhere with just me and my girlfriend, and like those conversations come out of the woodwork pretty quickly, and there's like it's not time to joke anymore. Like there was some really hard conversations to have, um, but like you, providing you're on the same page in it, and they go well, you feel 100 times better about it, and like through that you can identify things. Like I say, like my future planning, my forward mindset is pretty minimal, but I know that's something I need to work on, and that then reassures her and makes her feel better about the future planning with me. So we don't want to waste each other's time. And like I say, I mean, it was part of the conversation that like, well, if she needed someone that like was already confident in that mindset, then not saying it was an option, but like it was something we had to talk about. And it kind of it kicked my ass into gear a little bit because it's like, well, I don't want to fucking lose her over something like that, really. Like when I know it's not like I don't want kids, I don't want a future, I don't see a future with you. Like it's not that black and white. It's just more my head, just sort of going into sticking the head in the sand almost. You could say it, like just not quite sure, and then because I don't know, you panic, and then it just turns into a bit of a spiral, and then you don't talk about it because you've got all these thoughts flowing around your head, like, oh, if I say this, if I do that, is it? But then actually, once you say it and you say it out loud, I think, like you said, when you spoke in the mirror and you broke down and said, this is what's going on, actually saying it out loud to yourself and things kind of can give you a real boost. Anyway, it worked for me. Might not work for, like I say, not everything works for everyone, but giving people
Yeah.
options and ideas of how to do things and communicate things is a better toolbox than not doing anything at all, I think.
Yeah, I think for me, when it comes to sort of relationships, whether that's friends, family, or sort of like partners in that sense, it's definitely important to have those tough conversations. They're tough for a reason. Like
Mm.
is that grounding again. It's that fair fair playing field, and that you're gonna have a stronger relationship out of it, and hopefully a more fruitful and a longer term relationship. And if you've got that's a key part to people's mental health. If that's struggling, if they're like super career driven or super family driven, and you're like, oh Jesus Christ, I don't want this, and you feel like you're being dragged along,
Mm.
like because you've not said anything, that's potentially going to take you to a place that you don't want to be, and what
No.
that might do for your mental health could be significantly worse than just having the conversation at the sort of let's slow down, let's have a conversation, and then go away as two separate people and come back and make a sensible decision,
Yeah.
rather than sort of rushing in or again, in some cases just being dragged. Like you see it with some men that are just panicked. They've got a girlfriend, and all of a sudden, 18 months later, they're married and got a kid in a house, and they're like, "How did that happen?"
Yeah, I mean it works both ways, and you've got to give some things time. And like we're talking together on a podcast, and it sounds like it's a bloody walk in the park, but there's so many so many different situations out there, and I think yeah, like it's easy to say, oh, you just got to have a conversation. But I've definitely been in situations where you might not feel confident or comfortable having that conversation. So I suppose again we're at this moment we're at that stage of like right, we're identifying things that need to happen, like how to get men talking or ways around doing it. But then I suppose it's then down to how people can feel comfortable doing it and actually the actions that are taken. Like it's super hard, and like I definitely still find myself sometimes sticking my head in the sand and not wanting to have a conversation or putting things off a bit longer than they probably should have done, or letting things stew in my head a bit longer, and then if I'd said it, I don't know, days or weeks earlier, it would have just sort of it would have had less pressure on myself. And usually, the moment you say it, it does make life a lot easier, and you feel like a big weight off your shoulders. But yeah, that's the sort of the $1 million bit, isn't it? It's like how you then transfer this awareness and this initial stages into making it a lot more confident. Um, I think that,
Yeah, I no, I completely agree with you. I think we this is obviously a solution. The biggest issue isn't necessarily the talking part. That I think we both agree that the biggest issue is that self awareness is that first step,
mm,
and then that second step is, am I going to do something about it? Like
yeah,
if you're unable to like, and that's where we've sort of talked about the professional angle, and that might be that thing that sort of kickstarts that side of things. But for some men, I think it can just be a case of, this is where I'm at, this is where I want to be. There's something not working here. What's not working? And having that conversation with themselves. But it is unfortunately, and probably will be, like you say, the $1 million question, and probably the hardest thing to diagnose or the hardest thing to spot is when you're going down. Is like, where do you
yeah,
catch yourself on that
yeah,
fall? Like if you can spot it early, great. If you're like, but that's never the case. You're never going to spot it day one. You might be like, oh, that was
no,
good, and then all of a sudden, 2 days later, you're feeling a bit down, but you brush it off. It's
yeah,
usually months and months and months of pressure or thoughts, or just sort of being left alone with your own decisions, and just takes you to a point where you're like, oh shit, where's 9 months, 2 years, 10 years, in some case, like these
it can go on
bouts
for
of
a long,
mental
long
health.
time.
Yeah, so it's just that. How do we get people to go, oh shit, yeah, like that? That's the first stage, and obviously these are all great talking points and great things to get people past that stage once they've got to that stage. But that's going to be the biggest stage. Is men? It's not necessarily men don't want to talk. It's sometimes men are just,
It's the realization of
I
it
guess,
almost.
oblivious. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's just oblivion going through.
Yeah.
Um, just
And,
sort
and
of
I think,
powering through life.
and I think you could also look at different sort of like socio-economic levels of where men come from, like whether you're looking at a poverty-stricken sort of level all the way up until high functioning leveling of like top society, if you want to call it that. But in terms of like the top percentage of earners, the high rollers and everything, like there's such a vast, like, for not just for men, for women, for the whole vastness of society, like it ranges. And I think what we touched on earlier, like it's one thing, it's not a one shoe fits all sort of method, but it's then like it's such a big can of worms. I think because I was speaking to someone the other evening or the other day in the pub, and he's had gambling, drink addictions and stuff, and he was like, well, I'm getting back in the gym now. Like he's a big lad, and he's like, I'm getting back in the gym of training, and yeah, and he was going on about all the tests me and stuff. I was like, oh, so you taking steroids? And like, being with my sports background, like I know quite a bit about steroids, and I sort of started questioning him, and he was a bit taken aback. He's like, "Oh, you sort of know what you're talking about." I was like, "Yeah, well, I come from a sporting background. Like, you need to learn all the ins and outs of things and understand why people do that, and then everything." And he was sort of going on. I was like, "Well," he's like, "Yeah, I'm 2 weeks in. I've just started training off the bat." And I was sort of like, "Well, if you haven't trained for years and you're going straight onto the steroids and stuff, like, what's the point? Like, if you're not going to sort of build up a bit of a foundation base, and then I understand if that's the route you want to take, fine, that's your choice. I've got no judgment towards it whatsoever." I was sort of questioning him, like, well, why do it straight off the bat? Like, you're still going out on the weekend, having a few drinks, and sort of having a heavy weekend. He's like, yeah, Monday to Friday, I'm really clean, I don't drink, like eating well, but then on the weekend I sort of blow it. And I was kind of like, I was pushing him a little bit. I could see he was getting a little bit uncomfortable about it, but I like it was a conversation I'm really interested in, so I wanted to just see how it went. And he was like, you don't get it. Like, I was addicted to gambling, I was addicted to drugs, I was addicted to booze. I need something to be addicted to make me do it almost. And I didn't quite understand that at first. Like, I was just giving the whole as a more like the professional side of things. And again, this is something I've sort of only really just reflected on in the last couple of days, more in the build up to this, because I thought it was quite a um, good example to talk about, because I didn't understand his situation as much, and I was giving it the whole professional side and why are you doing this, why are you doing that, like you should do it this way and stuff, but actually not taking in his personal account of he's got all these mental health issues that I've never experienced in my life. I have no idea where he's coming from. I can spurt all this stuff that I know about, but actually, is it relatable to what he can do? Um, and yeah, actually, it hit me the other day. I was like, yeah, I have no fucking idea his situation, like why he has to do it. If that's what gets him into the gym and that's what's doing it, who am I to say you're doing it wrong or you're not benefiting from it? Like, I still think it's not the best way to do it. But if that's what's going to get him away from boozing, taking drugs all weekend or week, and getting back in the gym, and it's like it's not. I mean, it's probably not as detrimental to his health and stuff as everything else he was doing. So who am I to sort of go, why are you doing that? I will always challenge it and I always have my opinion on things. But then, yeah, I had that sort of realization is I've never been addicted to anything. I don't understand that addiction side of things. And I would need to understand more about it than he was saying. And actually, I think even just having that conversation with him was really, again, opening. It was two guys, him talking about his addictions and what's working for him at the moment. And yeah, then I had a bit of a like, oh shit, did I push him a bit far then? Did I go in a bit heavy? But actually, like, I was saying my piece, he was saying his, but it's made me then learn a lot more about other people's mental health, not just my own, but actually how other people deal with things and certain treatments or methods that would work better for them. So I thought that was a really interesting conversation that I had quite recently, and it made me, yeah, think again, like I know a lot, but I don't know anything about that. I don't know other people's situations. And I think that rings really clearly with like we said, like not everything is going to work for everyone. It's not a one shoe fits all, and then that vast spectrum of people and how it all works for everyone is again, it's quite a sometimes overwhelming thought to have. Um, but having these conversations, like the highlight of it through obviously the pandemic and everything, is a great way to really open it up and make people feel more confident. But I still feel like this is quite early stages of the development and the progression in tackling and helping mental health. I don't think it will ever be tackled, but you can certainly help it and sort of get people on the right track of understanding things.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I think you're really interesting conversation. I mean, we both suffer from a form of mental health. Everyone suffers from our form of mental health, but yeah, we are thankfully from our position and where we're at. It's not the worst situation. There are so many other elements that could have been in place that could have made us fall further down that slope before we sort of addressed it. Like you touched on it, there's social, economic factors that might be in there. There's obviously addiction. There are a myriad of things that affect mental health, and there is no solution. There is no one size fits all, as you said. I think for me, it's awareness is probably the biggest thing. Again, another reason that I want to do this is just to bring up more awareness. I think it's really funny that you said that it was in the pub. There's a guy that I found on LinkedIn a few weeks ago before sort of looking at this. He started a mental health charity for men. It's called 2 Pints Deep.
I think I might have heard that actually. He just goes for beer with people.
Yeah, well, he goes for beer for people, but it's also that sort of when people start to open up is that second pint. So it's 2 pints deep is when you're more likely to open up, which is quite a fun way of looking at it. But it's important that it's not always that case. Like we should be having these conversations a little bit more.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's the whole reason for this, and I want to speak to as many men as possible. Obviously, started with you guys. Friends and family will be sort of the first port of call, but I will be reaching out to as many people that are willing to speak. So, yeah, I'm excited to hear other people's stories. I'm honoured that you've shared some stories with me. I think we've had discussions ourselves as friends, but you've also potentially opened up a little bit more in this that you might not have done in a more friendly setting. So, again, it's great that you.
Quite right, and I think I think it'd be great for this to drive off. I had a slight hesitation at first, but actually it was definitely overcome by actually it's a really good opportunity, and like you say, like we've been friends for a long time. Like you do touch on these things, but actually sometimes when you put in an environment like this and it's a bit more specific, I suppose, about a topic. I think again for anyone, for me anyway, it makes it a bit easier to talk about because you've got that specific, like just dropping into conversation that like something isn't right or things like it can be a bit hard. And I think maybe that's sometimes one of the hardest things is actually when something is hard and how you approach it yourself and how you go and talk to people. And other than just going, I suppose you could just go, I need to talk to you about something. But for me, that I find that really hard, like because it already almost sets a tone of what you're going to talk about, and then I don't know if it builds like a bit of pressure behind it. But something like this, like I find it like I'm not shy. I'm not scared about talking about issues and things I've had, and I think it's definitely something that hopefully you can encourage other people to do so. And I think with the rest of the podcast, like you say, branching out like I touched on, like the whole social economic side of things, and like really getting people from different walks of life. Because I think our friendship group and sort of family stuff, like we all have similar walks of life, and you would have like I can imagine it all being relatively similar conversations. We've obviously all got our own stories and got things to go through, but it would be really interesting to speak to people in high pressure jobs or people that are in poverty and stuff and see like that's when you start getting the whole spectrum of things and different walks of life and things that affect people. Like one thing that affects me or like a group of friends could affect someone completely differently. And I think that's for me, that would be a personal interest of seeing where that kind of lies.
Yeah, I think I'm interested in that. I'm also interested in. I actually don't think we're going to, even though we're all from similar, we're a friendship group. Those initial ones. I'm actually really excited to see how different they all are. I do genuinely think they'll all be significantly different, just because of other conversations that I've had with those
No,
people.
I
In
may
that
have
group as
generalised
well.
that a
So
little bit more.
well, I know where you're coming from sort of like a standpoint. You're talking
Yeah,
more of the spectrum of everything else. So it's all going to be interesting. I'm really looking forward to it. But yeah, Matt, I appreciate your time. Thank you so much
pleasure as
for being
always.
guest number one.
Thank you very much
What
for
an
having
honour.
me. The pilot.
Yeah, no worries. Exactly. Yes. Awesome. All right. Cheers, mate. Bye
Nice
bye.
one. See you soon.